Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me, as usual, Neil Orfield, PlayerQ DFS on Twitter, and the host of the High Stakes DFS podcast on awesemo.com. You recently had you had Brian Jester on. I had Brian Jester on. Then you had Brian Jester on. He's making the rounds after crushing it in MMA. Although this past weekend, when an 81-way max salary dupe wins, you just chalk it up and you go, not going to be me.
Yeah, wasn't going to happen. That was not a fun one. It was, for me at least, most of my lineups were dead after the second fight. I had 6 remaining at that point, which was actually, I think, that's a decent number to have with the first 2 fights having 2 fighters that are almost certainly going to be in the optimal, putting up 142 and 121 at their salaries. But I had 6 left, and then a couple fights later, I had 0 left. I assume, did you have any with a fighting chance at the end?
Not after Omar Morales got knocked out by Medic, because I had way more of him than Medic.
Oh, yeah.
And then really it came down to if Parker Porter could have survived 15 more seconds against Almeida, or if Todorovic could have lasted and not got knocked out in the last 20 seconds of round 1 against Chidi, because he was 55% owned or whatever, and Almeida was almost 60% owned. The lineups that I had running were lineups that like Hooper was one of the highest owned underdogs, and he had 142. So obviously my lineups with Hooper and Hughes, I'm probably not playing Chidi or Geltman Almeida. So it's kind of like, well, my lineups also don't have Porter and Todorovic. So it's like, if they get second round stoppages, if they get 95, I could 95 to 100 points for either of them. It's possible that they're not optimal, and it's still fine for me or whatever. And and they couldn't survive. And because most of my lineups, if they had Hooper or Hughes, had one of those 3 of Almeida, Chidi, and Jokhani or whatever his name is, and Holmes, but not all of them, because I purposely am excluding those combinations because they're duped too much.
Did you limit yourself to just one of those 3?
At 2 at max, but it really depended on all the other combinations, because I do a manual process for duplication. I just go through and calculate dupes of specific fighters. Mm-hmm. So the 2 highest, most expensive fighters, how many combinations of the other 4 fighters can there be in a lineup without stacking? And then I do with 3 of them. So the top 2, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And once I start, when I start seeing anything over 20 as the average duplication, I just start eliminating them. And then I start getting combinations that are lower and lower. And then I also have a list of combinations that are duped at certain salary ranges. So, for instance, it's quite possible that, the average duplication is 15, but it's more geared towards 49.5 and above, but there are combinations of, 49.1, 48.9, 49.2 that could be possibly unique, or at least under 5, that I'll separate them out into a separate build. So I'll go through a build where I leave my max salary at 50K, and then I'll have a build where I leave my max salary at 49.5, one at 49,000, and then kind of merge several lineups together. If on an 11 fight slate, if this is a 15 fight card, I don't bother doing that, because you could still find enough under 5s, even with some of I put in these 3 fighters, do the dupe calculation, and go, yeah, many of these are duped, but I know exactly what combination they are, and I just group out, this combination with that guy, this combination with this woman, this combination with that, and then as long as I don't do that, my average duplication comes now, 4 to 6 range. And then it's like...
Looking at your lineups, I see. So you had 106 lineups in the biggest field tournament, and only 6 of them used above 49.5 salary.
Right, and those were my 6 single entry 3 max lineups.
Okay.
So basically, I played 100 lineups as my MME set, and then I had 6 single entry qualifier 3 max type of lineups. Hence why I don't mind if I'm playing in fields that are 200 or less, like I'm most likely going to be playing a lineup that's maybe 49.5 or above.
Yeah. But in the large field, you left Sarah, which is also made me feel better about my lineups, because that was a stand that I took. Just looking at the Vegas lines, there was only really one fight where there was a really heavy favorite. Looked like most of the fights were relatively close, so I thought it was a good fight to leave some salary on the table. So I set my salary cap at 49,600, I believe. So I didn't really go low, but I set a little bit just to get a little bit more unique. I have one that's above that, which was my hand-built lineup. But other than that, everything was 49,600 or below, just because I thought it seemed like a good day. And again, I spent half an hour on my lineup, so I didn't do a whole lot with them, but I was just, how can I make what looks like a good lineup set in the limited amount of time I had before I was going to an art fair on Saturday. So I was I set a little salary cap, which seemed reasonable given the Vegas odds on most of the fights being relatively close. I used the Awesemo likelihood of getting to 100 plus fantasy points to set kind of exposure limits on different players, on different fighters, and then I set max 2 of the 3 chalkiest fighters, because it seemed like there was kind of a cutoff after Holly Holm. Although I think she came in maybe a little bit lower owned than she was expected.
I think she came in at 34 to 37.
Okay.
And that's what I expected.
Thought she was gonna, that is about where she came. I thought she was going to be 40 something. But yeah, that's kind of all I did. I didn't spend a whole lot of time. Then I did, two uniques, so that I wouldn't have, each lineup one off the other to get a little bit different. But I don't know. I thought my lineup seemed fine based on the sports. No, what's the website I've been using for checking dupes or for checking
Sports-projections.com.
No, it's not that website. I do use that website too. It's the website I've been telling you about. The guy in my DM sent me his website, which is a similar kind of name, but he calculates EV based on simulations.
The DFSsweat.com.
Yeah, DFS Sweat. Yeah, based on that, my lineups, I did have a positive EV lineup set, which I don't always in MMA. So that was
but that's according to that simulations. And
exactly, that's according to his simulations. And yeah, Brian and I talked about that on the High Stakes podcast, that when he was a guest, that his lineups always do poorly according to the simulations, and then of course he's killing it. So who knows what to make of that.
Well, I mean, your salary, distribution was fine. I mean, I'm looking at each salary limit, 50,000, 49.9, 49.8. So like at 50,000 in the large field MMA contest, the unique percentage was 2%. So there's only 2% of lineups that were unique at 50,000. Under 5, 9%. So if you go down to 49.9, under 5 is 19%. Then 27% for 49.8, 33% for 49.7, 42% for 49.6, and 56% for 49.5. 7% over 20. You don't get down to 0% over 20 until 49.3. But still, like, even at 49.5, like 56% of the liners were under 5s. Which, for an 11-fight card, that's what I'm gearing towards. 15-fight card, 14-fight card, I'm gearing way more towards uniques than an 11-fight card. But, I mean, there are some lineups that, you have to realize, there are some lineups at 49.4. If I go to the most duplicated lineups, like, for instance, most duplicated lineup was 191 times, 50K. But there was a lineup at 49.6, duplicated 130 times.
Wow.
Right? So, like a lot of these are 50K lineups. 49.9 lineup, 49.9, 50,000. Let's look for the next. There's a 49.8 lineup duped 64 times. Another one duped 60 times. But if we keep on 49.7 lineup, duped 48 times, 44 times. Like here's a 49.4 lineup duped 42 times. Right? Because it depends on the combination of fighters. Because this is the lineup. Almeida, Chidi, Poliano, Viana, Ponzinibbio, Medic, Hooper. Like, all these fighters are like 30%. Like, Ponzinibbio was the lowest owned fighter, but like just that combination of a 55, 55, 28, 31, 35.
Yep.
Like, there's not many combinations of that wouldn't be duplicated a bunch of times. So that's why I spend 4 hours on Saturday on my lineups.
And Brian does too. It seems like MMA, you definitely can gain an advantage by doing that. I mean, just listening to what you do with your process, looking at each individual combo of lineups, that makes a lot of sense to actually look at like what is possible here, what is the likelihood that I'm going to get unique if I have, these 2 or 3 fighters in a lineup. It definitely seems worthwhile to spend your time in MMA.
Right, and I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be going to Las Vegas for the next 8 days.
I just saw that. Yeah.
So no DFS for me. But in June and July, I'm going to be working on a little bit more efficiency on my combination calculate. Like, I want to be able. It doesn't have to be like perfect. It doesn't have to be. I want to try to avoid like having to scrape anything. I want to avoid XML documents. I want to avoid all that type of stuff and lining shit up. And using VLOOKUPs as little as possible because shit breaks all the time. Naming conventions and anything like that. I just want to be able to put in, here are the fighters on the slate. So I could just simply copy and paste the fighters and their prices. And who their opponent is. So obviously, so you don't have combinations that include the opponent in it. And then be able to have almost a sheet that has a combination chart of like for like this slate, it would be like, it would show Almeida home XXX, which is fighter, and then show me how many, what's the size of the contest, right? I could put that in. That could be a manual input, 31,000, whatever like that, and the ownerships of all the fighters, and go average duplication, an average duplication at each salary point. So 50, like something like that, and then give me maybe Almeida, home, Cheaty, XXX, right? And all it does is auto generate that. So all I have to do is put it in and press, button. And it just give me a sheet that has, and then I could just sort by that, because that's what I would be doing manually. So it doesn't have to be like create all the possible lineups, and then instead of having to do all that, it just give me the 22 fighters on the slate, their opponents, their ownerships, and then just show me here's all the combinations of these 3 fighters, these 4 fighters, these 2 fighters, these stuff like that. So I could just simply go sort by like average duplication, and then just store like the average duplication of these 4 fighters and these 2 slots left is 107. So it's like, okay, these 4 fighters, I don't want all 4 of them in a lineup. And then I could look and go, do 3 of them add up too much? And then I could say no more than 2 of those fighters. And then like it just speeds up my own manual process of literally typing, just give me what 2 fighters and what's their ownership, and I have a little calculator for that, right? But then I have to do like all the combination. I have to do all the combination. I go A, B, C, A, B, D, A, B, E, A, B, F, and then constantly just okay, that's good. That's no good. That's right. Because once I got down to like Elise Reed, like she was low owned enough that I could do A, B, Elise Reed, and then the rest of the lineup was fine. But then I also have to go by salary, so I have to do that again 2 or 3 times. I think there's a more automated way for me to at least have that all calculated for me.
I assume you're doing this in Excel then?
Yes. That's
really all you do, right?
Right. That's all I do. Simple. They're very simple formulas, Excel, whatever. Give me the combinations. Give me the, just that's it. Because that's what I do with the combinations. I run the combinations in Lineup HQ.
Okay. Yep.
So basically I put in 300 max, and then obviously 1 unique player, any salary possible, and then these 4 fighters. Give me lineups. And obviously it's not going to get to 300. It's going to get to a certain point and there's no more lineup. So then I could go, give me these 3 fighters, and that's it. And then it comes out, and then it stops at 56. So I'm like, okay, there's 56 combinations of these versus the contest size, and give me, okay, what's the duplication factor, right? And that's it. So I'm more likely, like if I take a look at my user inspection over here for my lineups, like other than my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, my single entry 3 max lineups, one was duped 137 times. Okay? And that actually was my small field $400 MMA qualifier lineup. So that makes sense. I was playing in a 31-man contest.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then the other ones were 30, 16, 12, and 9. Because all my other lineups were 49.5 and below, so I could easily see it right here. So out of all the other lineups that weren't those, my most duped was 13, 12, 10, 9, 8. And then I ended up with like 86 or something under 5s, and not many uniques, like 16 uniques.
Yeah.
Which it's tough on a slate like this unless you're leaving like 2,000 on the table.
Right.
But like in comparison to yours, like NC Orfield, let's see. Yeah, you had a bunch of lineups, 36, 33. Right, 36 times, even though 49.4 salary. Like you have some of these lineups that are like on your first page of 10 on the screen, you have lineups that are 49.4 to 49.6. Duplication 36, 33, 28, 26, 24, 24, 23, 22, 16, 16. Like I'm already down in the single digits by that point. And it's primarily because of these combinations. Like this top one, this 36, you got Almeida, Chidi, Holmes, and Hooper. And Medic. And Vieira. I mean, like, dude, you have it leaves 600 on the table, but you have, 250+% owned fighters, 36, 35, 31, and 28, or something. Like this combination I've already weeded out. Like this Almeida, Chidi, Holmes combination, I automatically did not have 3 of them in a line. Like, they were at max.
Ultimately, though, these are loss leaders, right? I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 8 with 20 or more, which is kind of a high number. But for the most part, if when I was looking at my numbers, I'm like, I'm pretty happy with my number of uniques or
under 5. No, under 5s you're good. Yeah, you have
my under 5s are pretty good. So
right, well that's the way that I used to like Neil. Like my progression in MMA was more of your type of attitude.
You started kind of what I'm doing now, and you've just advanced since
right. Then. That it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to make 150 lineups, and I know that 30 of them are garbage. Yeah. Right? Not garbage, but just like too duped.
They're pretty garbage.
And that's just 36. The cost of doing business. Right.
Right. And
then I'm like, I'm leaking. This is too much of a leak to have 20% of my lineups be, 20+, 30+ dupes on an 11, 12, 13 fight card. That's like, what's the common ground between these lineups? And I just started seeing the common ground of the combinations. Like, okay, if I could figure out the combinations, and Brian said this on your podcast, that's his first part of his process of figuring out what not to do.
Yeah.
Right? Find the combinations that are going to be most used and then scrap them.
And it is a pretty big leak to have this number of lineups that are just like, you can't win significant money with anything that's, over 20 lineups. So those are basically dead lineups in terms of making big money, or really anything over 10. I don't know. It seems easy enough to shore up that leak. So it does make sense, I think, to spend the time to plug those leaks when you are getting to this number of lineups that have, 10 plus dupes is, you're just not going to win that much money.
Right. The top unique guy was Dalladino at 115. His average salary was 48.4. So obviously, like Brian Jester, average salary 48.8, 89 uniques, 147 under 5s. Understand that on a slate where an 81 way dupe 50K wins first, all these guys take a bath.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean,
We talked about Palladino on my show as well. Brian named him among the best MMA DFS players. He mentioned that Palladino really thrives in the chaos as well. So I think they have similar playing styles. Yeah, I was looking at Brian seemed to be leaving a ton of salary on the table. So he seems to be playing it a little bit more like NFL Showdown.
right.
In
Like
some
my style is much more like need lunch money.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he also mentioned Jay-Z Rucker on the podcast.
Yep.
I talked to him in Discord. So like typically our lineups look very I mean, he's much more willing to go for the uniques than the under fives, but very similar process to mine. But need lunch money. So for instance, on this past slate, 150 lineups, 120 under fives, 45 uniques. Average salary 49.5. So like I look at like N Van Hare,
Yep.
very similar. Sean Zan, very similar. A lot of 150 lineups, 127 unique, 127 under fives, 42 uniques, average salary 49.4. And Sean Zan is very similar to that.
Yep.
Right? So I like Dark Manalook, very similar to that also. Brick was very similar. E.T. Phone Home was very similar. Right? Where the out of the lineups, the percent of under fives is very high, but the uniques is not that high. So a lot of lineups where you're duping with 2, 3, 4 rather than 1, especially when it's an 11 fight card. So it's like these are the guys. Now, someone like Mocklovin, on the other hand, 150 lineups, 154 under fives, 21 uniques. So it's like that.
Maybe not his best sport at this point.
Right. I try to avoid that. He's much more likely just jam projections and whatever it is type of thing. So like I like looking through and seeing this. So I see mine 106 entries, 89 under 5, 16 unique. So like that ratio 84 to 50, 84% under 5s, 15% unique is very similar. Need lunch money, 80% under 5, 30% unique. 85% under 5, 28%. 88, 28. Like, that's N Van Hare and Sean Zan and Need Lunch Money and Brick even. Kind of like, I'm looking for like that. For at least these types of slates. At least for smaller cards.
15 fight card, you probably want more uniques, more under 5s.
Right. Well, you're going to naturally get more under 5s. But I'm saying I'm not purposely prioritizing uniqueness compared to under 5 on a 15 fight card. I'd be more inclined to there are many more uniques to find, so why not get them? And you may not need to get uniques at 47.7, right? I could find uniques at 49.7. I could find uniques at 50. Dude, there are 50K salary uniques even on a 15 fight card. So it's like I'd rather find those than automatically leave 1,500 on the table and just go, I'm going to take those uniques only. Because then you get so burned if common construction that are slightly off. A solo winner will win with 49.9, and you'll be like, well, why didn't I get that lineup? It's like, yeah, because you just, even though there aren't as many unique lineups up there, there are still, if you could find them, they actually have a much higher win probability, because obviously salary is related to win percentage, because that's how the fighters are at least priced. So it's like, so I study more of those types of players, and while Brian is much more hardcore, and what he said on the show, I thought he said two things on the show that I thought were excellent. That he has macro strategies for sports.
Yep.
And I have macro strategies for sport. Like, I have the same concept, but I'm a little bit more micro. So like a macro strategy requires a lot. Bad players can't have a macro strategy because they live too much in the single slate mindset. Of what's going to win on this slate? I don't care about anything. I care about the Chiefs-Bucks showdown. What's going to win this time? Brian's the type of person where it's like, I just want to play sub 3% owned players in every lineup I play for the entire season of Showdown. Yep. And I know that there are going to be 2 or 3 slates a season that are going to have one of those guys is going to put up a score where they can have a lot of unique lineups like that. That if I play 51 slates, 55 slates, hopefully on those 2, 3, 4 slates, I get a unique winner and win 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, whatever it is, and not worry. And so he doesn't have to go into slates going, well, is this the type of slate to play a 3% owned player, or are these just nope? I'm playing my macro strategy. A lot of times he plays for low scoring games, chaos games where correlations won't even matter anymore, and he's just like, doesn't matter that the total's 57. It doesn't matter that this backup running back that's now starting is 2,700 and he should be 7,000. Like, I'm just treating this like any other slate, and he knows that he's plus EV no matter what the exact. Maybe for this slate, technically he should be doing something different, but he has a much more long-term perspective on that.
I mean, that's how I play NFL Showdown too. I mean, I think NFL Showdown is the easiest one to just take a macro perspective of, I'm going to play lineups that are clearly not optimal. I do the same thing as Brad. I go way overweight on the guys who are really low owned on Showdown just because weird things happen in NFL, and it works out over the course of the season, even though most slates are dead because those guys put up 0.
Right. It's very similar to MLB. I mean, like, to me, my macro strategy is that, like, I have no problem. My macro strategy on the smaller slates, especially, is what's the 30% owned stack, and just X them out. And it's like, if I consistently do this, I'm gonna lose most of the time, but it's plus EV when it's a 5-game slate and there's a team that has 3% owned batters. Why not? Why not stack against Corbin Burns? Like, why? Am I doing it in all my lineups? No, but I'm just saying in general. Or on a larger slate. Like, we have a 10-game MLB slate. And you have 2 teams that are wildly owned, right? There's the Coors game, and the Yankees are facing God knows who, and they're too underpriced on DraftKings, right? Aaron Judge is 5,200 for no reason, right? Then you got to get cheap stack there, and they're facing who knows what in the Wrigley win game or whatever the hell it happens to be. And I'll just go, okay, I'm playing 100 lineups. I'm going to play 100 lineups and hope nothing happens enough in these games that if they fail, I don't know who's going to do well, but I want 100 combinations of everyone else.
Yeah.
And then when the chalk team goes off, then so be it. But I mean, and they have to really go off. It's not like oh, they put up 6 runs. It's like, no, they have to really go off on a 10+ MLB slate. But it's like when people ask sometimes, they'll go, so who'd you play? What were your top stacks? And I go, pretty much everyone else, and just not the Dodgers and the Astros or whatever the 2 chalk teams are.
So I think that I take a less strong stand than you and Brian do, maybe in terms of in MLB. What you're describing in MLB, I usually won't full fade the 30% owned team, but I might play 8 or 10% of them in full stacks. And I also, or sometimes I do full fade them as my primary stack, but then I'll still allow those batters to be my secondary stack or my one-offs, just because but I have thought about taking a stronger stance of just, well, if the Mets are going to be 30% owned in Coors Field and it's a 5-game slate, why not just full fade the entire game? And like you said, all you're really fading is like a multi-home run game from one of those guys, or the game going completely off. Like, otherwise you can generally survive it. If there's a couple solo home runs, that's really not the end of the world in that kind of game. So but
I'm looking from a macro perspective of like, instead of me determining, like, yes, you're building lineups that are plus EV. So like, you're going, okay, I have enough leverage in the lineup. I'm playing a low owned SP2. I'm playing a 5-man stack that's 5% owned.
Yeah,
I could play 28% owned Byron Buxton in the lineup. I could play 32. You could. They're the highest projected player. Absolutely, perfectly fine. But for me, like, to me, that's there's other plus EV lineups that are higher, larger standard deviation. But my macro strategy for the entire baseball season is to just, I know it's plus EV to do what I'm doing. I don't know what slate, the combination of 2 other teams that aren't those teams that go off. So why am I making the determination well, this I could play a 3-man Dodger stack. It's like, no, I want single digit owned guys on a 10-game slate where there's 2 or 3 teams that are 15, 20, 25% owned. It's just whatever. Just so I don't have to think, like what Brian's point is that you don't have to think, you don't have to go into the slate going, when is the exception? It's like there are no exceptions. It's just that's how you play it.
Yep. No, I think it was a really sharp point as well, and it's something that I think a lot of people do without really necessarily naming it. Or a lot of sharp players, I think, do have kind of macro strategies like that. Like, I mean, I guess in NFL Showdown, one example would be I always leave salary on the table. In the large field stuff, I'm never using my full salary. Even though you could, there are ways to do it. I'm just using the macro strategy of I'm going to leave salary on the table and hope that this is a slate where all the expensive guys don't go off.
Right. Or you could do a macro strategy in the NFL Showdown of never pairing your wide receiver captain with a quarterback.
Yeah.
And go, there are plenty of times where you don't need the quarterback, and just saying, I'm building in too much duplication because people do correlate that type of thing. And I choose to, I mean, these are like, I consider these like the micro of the macro, right? Not just a general, like Brian was talking about much more macro stuff.
Right.
But there is a micro.
Although he doesn't actually do what he said he thought about doing use a 1% owned guy in every lineup. But then when I followed up, he said, it's not actually something that I've done yet. So that's not an example of something that he has actually been doing so far. I don't know if he gave any concrete examples, but I think that it is, generally You're taking the approach of you're not trying to make the lineups that are the most likely to win on this slate. You take the same approach in certain sense every slate and benefit long term.
Right.
Yeah.
Like for instance, it's a macro strategy in MMA would be like always play double the field of the opponent of the highest owned fighter for leverage. Right? And you don't have to, like, is that correct exploitatively on every slate? Not necessarily, depending on the lineup. Right. But it's one of these it's one of those default things. So like I say in MLB a lot of times on Roto Grinders, is like my favorite slates are when high owned, there are high owned SP2s. SP2 types. Like the 7K guy that is not the greatest pitcher, but he's still underpriced and he ends up being 36% owned. It's like, I'm going to play a lot of stacks against that guy. I'm not necessarily going to be playing a lot of stacks against aces, SP1 ace types. But I love when mediocre pitchers are high owned in MLB because the pitching just sucks on that slate. And that happens to be the best out of the bunch.
Happens a lot, too.
Right. So, like, my default strategy is I don't care what the team is. I don't even care what their prices are. I don't care what the projections are. Just that if I make sure to allocate, if I'm playing 100 lineups, I'm not playing all 100 like that, but I know that I'm allocating 20 lineups or something. There's some select group of lineups that the whole purpose is to gain leverage off of high-owned starting pitchers, right? And then you may have a certain percentage of your allocation that you're dedicating to completely play too cheap pitcher, hot overpriced teams type of, like, you just go from the perspective of here are the construction types on any 10-plus game slate that are drastically not played, right? In combination, and then just go, how many of these types of lineups do I want? It's like, I want to play some of these. I want to make sure on every slate to find a sub 7K pitcher to play, right? Because on average, if you just plot it out for the entire season, there's enough compared to the ownership, it's the largest amount of leverage to get a 7K pitcher that puts up 25 plus points.
Yep.
That I don't know what pitcher that's going to be, but I'm going to take all the sub 7K pitchers and say I want one of them in all my lineups. If you just did that, like that's kind of what Brian was saying. It's like finding that macro strategy that is plus EV.
Yep.
And going, I don't care what happens on this single slate. I know that if I do this 180 times, I'm probably going to profit.
Yeah. No, it's a really sharp approach. I've thought about doing that fade the highest owned pitcher. I mean, not Yeah. But then again, for me, it's always because I play exploitatively. I never want to just full fade the highest owned pitcher on every slate because sometimes the highest owned pitcher, according to like the Osmo top pitchers tool, is under owned. So I can't really take that kind of a stand on that. But that's
Right.
something that I've
But
thought about doing it.
if anything, you would say instead of the highest owned pitcher, you'd say the most over-owned pitcher.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Right, like
Which I
something
have.
like that.
I've tried that for stretches and just got completely obliterated trying it. Of course, it was a really small sample size. I probably should have kept doing it over time. That's
But
something
yeah,
I've
but you
actually-
have to understand it's high variant. Like that's I think
I
the
know.
thing that we need to harp on so much, especially when you talk to Brian, is that he is, and that's why he has the Emotional Bankroll podcast, is that playing that high variance, your swings are going to be massive. You're going to go on massive losing streaks.
Yeah.
And you may also go at you could win 3 out of 4 weeks in a row and have 100K binks in a 300K binks in 1 month and then go an entire year without seeing nothing. Like that's what that is. Do you have to go to that extreme? No, but that's much better than playing GPPs too conservatively.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just making plus EV lineups long term is going to be profitable. Yeah. So one thing that I have changed, or that I have maybe started to change a little bit with my MLB process this year, and now I'm questioning it a little bit. Although I actually don't know if I've changed it as much as I think I have. I've been sort of coming around to the idea of pitchers sometimes, even though they show negative leverage in the top pitchers tool, sometimes, well, if a top pitcher, so I'm talking about the Osmo top pitchers tool. So sometimes it'll be like an example recently was, I think Brandon Woodruff was coming in at 50% owned, and he was only 30% likely to be a top 2 pitcher on DraftKings. And I've sort of, and usually I'll kind of look at that, and what I do is I just set one cap for basically all of my pitchers on DraftKings, and then sometimes I'll change 1 or 2 pitchers individually when I think they're outliers, but typically I kind of use the top pitchers tool to figure out where do I want to set my cap on pitchers. And then this year I've been sort of talked out of that a little bit because I'm thinking like, well, what if Brandon Woodruff only has a 30% chance of being one of the top 2 pitchers, but he's still very likely to put up 22 fantasy points and he's going to be close enough, and is that really going to hurt you to have him in your lineups? So I have been sort of tinkering with the idea of increasing my the amount that I allow myself to have various pitchers, but then I'm like, it worked pretty well last year though, setting those kinds of caps. Just an idea that I'm struggling with is where do I want to set that cap, and should I be maybe tinkering with more individual pitcher exposures, like going in and for each individual pitcher deciding what kind of exposures I want more in line with like the top pitchers tool. That's something that I'm struggling with currently. Not really related to a macro strategy necessarily, but just something I'm struggling with.
Well, I think the main issue there is understanding what top 2 means. And I think a lot of people, even in sports like NFL Showdown or MMA, about optimal, right? We see slates that the optimal isn't, no one has it, right? So like on the top pitchers tool, you go, okay, Brandon Woodruff has a 30% chance of being one of the top 2 raw point pitchers on the slate.
Yeah.
Right? But there are other pitchers on the bottom that have a 4% chance. A 2% chance. It's like, well, if the 4% and 2% chance pitchers who are both like sub 1% owned put up 28 and 26 points and Woodruff puts up 24, he's not a top 2 pitcher. No, he misses the top 2 pitcher. But the winning lineup in the GPP will probably still have Brandon Woodruff.
Yeah, exactly.
Because no one who has both the 2 1% owned starting pitchers. It's quite possible that the winning lineup doesn't have either of those pitchers. I mean, the top 2 pitchers on the slate, no one, like Woodruff at 30% and whatever some other guy at 14% put up 20. Woodruff put up 24. There were 2 other pitchers that were very low owned that put up more than 24, but no one has that combination. Or they have that combination, but they have a stack that didn't get there. Or like, there's so few amount of lineups that have that combinations of pitcher that even though Brandon Woodruff has missed the top 2, still ends up being in the winning GPP lineup. So like there's a big difference, especially in baseball. Basketball, not so much. Basketball, we're more likely to see the top lineup be close to the winning GPP lineup be close to the optimal. Baseball is very hard because one,
it's going to be one-offs.
Right, it's going to be a ton of one-offs, and good luck getting that correct. And secondly, a lot of them are going to be low-owned, right? You're going to have a lineup that has a total lineup ownership of 48, right? And the optimal lineup scores 242 points in baseball. The winning GPP lineup is 190. Right? So it's like, do you care as much of the chances of being optimal or the chances of being in the winning lineup? Because they are related, but they really aren't the same thing. Because, and we'll see these conversations on Twitter. Like, you also post the chances of it being sometimes on an NFL slate, like your estimated joke calculations.
Yeah.
When like someone in basketball being like 88% owned in a large field GPP, right? It's a 4K guy that should be 6,500 based on the injuries. It's Jordan Nwora or some bullshit like that, and he's 3,800. He puts up 24 points, which is fine for 3,800, but not rocking the house. Like, you don't need Jordan Nwora, right? But he's most likely going to be in the winning lineup. Why is that? Because 88% of the lineups have Jordan Nwora in it. I mean, if he scored 8 points, probably not. But he scored enough points that just by the sheer amount of lineups that have him in it, that's going to do. He's not going to be in the optimal lineup.
Unless they completely duds, in which case one of those 12% might find its way.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. The difference between the winning lineup and the optimal lineup are different. But you're looking at in the top stacks or the top pitcher or the top, like those all assume not a winning GPP lineup, but the best possible lineup, that you could make.
Which is why I'm usually not that restrictive. And I guess why I don't set hard caps on individual pitcher exposures, because that would be like, where do you set it? I'm not going to put it right at their top 2% odds, because that's just silly, and I don't know, you're going to make some really bad lineups if you do that. But so I'm usually not that restrictive, but I do find that it might be helpful to set some kind of a cap that's lower than the ownership of the highest owned pitcher on most slates. It's obviously very slate dependent, just because then it forces all those other pitchers that have 1%, 5% ownership, but have much higher percent odds of being either the top 2 pitcher or top 2 value pitcher. It forces up their ownership, which I think can be helpful just to get a little bit different. But I go back and forth about whether I should be less restrictive or just keep it, coming in a little bit under keeping my cap a little bit under whatever the highest owned pitcher is typically is usually where it ends up being, which forces up the ownership on the other pitchers. But I don't know. It's something that I'm struggling with, and it's probably I'm only struggling with it this year because I haven't had the success that I had last year. So now I'm like, I'm trying to tinker. I'm trying to think, what could I be doing differently to make up for these differences? And ultimately, it comes down to I just haven't won a tournament. I'm still.
Well, don't you have a couple of top 5s or something?
Yeah, I have several top 10s at this point. Just 0 first place, which makes all the difference in the world, and it's very frustrating.
That's what happened to me last year. Last year, I had 17 top 20s and 8 top 10s. And I lost money in MLB last season.
Yeah.
So I had a second and then a bunch of 5th, 6th, 7th, 8ths.
Yeah.
Like up there. And then it's simple. And I'm not even playing 150.
Right.
And it's still not enough.
Yeah. When you're playing 150, you definitely need to be winning tournaments from time to time. And
right.
I mean, I don't know if you saw last week, I got 3rd place behind 2 lineups that were maybe marginally stacked. I shouldn't say unstacked, because the lineups did have 4 Giants in it and 3 Giants in the second one, or vice versa. So they did end up being stacked, but just not very large stack. So it kind of felt like it was.
Were they single bullets? Were they just single bullet guys?
No, they were both from the same 150 maxer.
Oh, okay. So it just so happened to just work out that way.
Yeah, just so happened that on this slate having Giants in your lineups made some sense, and they ended up being stacked because the Giants projected so well. So just a brutal way to, when you only get so many shots per year, or per month on the first place lineup, and not a fun
Yeah,
way.
but I wouldn't be as annoyed, I guess, if they were like on a 150 maxer. If there were 2 single bullets,
yeah,
then it's the type of thing is like if Joe Schmo just decided not to play today 15 minutes before the slate started or whatever. Like those types of people, you never get mad.
Yeah,
those are the people that fill the contest. I want those people to play. It's just that,
true.
Like if a 150 maxer beat you in some weird way like that, you'd be like, well, this is the guy that's playing every day. Like
Yeah.
There was no chance of him not playing those lineups other than their process or whatever. But some solo, recreational single bullet first and second place with just like 8 one-offs are like, any other day, this person could have just easily not played today.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. No. Yeah. No. It's frustrating, but this is also a winning player, guy who's won a lot of GPPs, so clearly has some idea what he's doing. It's just frustrating.
Who was it?
Jordan Lockhart. Are you familiar? He's an optimal guy.
Locks 282.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Maybe 262. There's
262.
I want to say Cowboys 282, Locks 262, but I'm not sure if that's right.
Right. Maybe that's the score between them.
Maybe.
Right. Yeah. It's a 7 overtime game.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not saying anything. I'm not trying to say anything negative about this user. I'm just saying it's frustrating to see that that kind of lineup ends up on top of me, because it's rare that you see lineups that have three batters from one lineup is the biggest stack. You don't see that winning on a large slate very often. So
yeah, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, it works out sometimes, and it works out. Happened to work out on this slate where I was near the top, had a shot.
Another thing that Brian was talking about on your latest episode that I agree I use as a teaching tool, and a lot of it is in the Theory of DFS course and the pregame show, is using exaggeration to understand a concept or to prove a theory, right? Because if you could exaggerate it, like his example in MMA was like, if I just go nuts and try to make 150 unique lineups no matter how I make it, and then run it out and saying, what's my expected value of these lineups? And then you could always scale it back, right? You go absolutely nuts, right? In MLB, you go I'm going to X out the 5 highest owned teams and the 5 highest owned pitchers. I'm going to play all 1% owned, whatever. You'll learn the concept of leverage, right? You'll learn why ownership matters. Do you have to go to that extent? No. Now you're getting into the range of your projection so low that you're probably negative EV, but at least you understand that concept. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have what if I just jam in the 150 best projected lineups into a contest? Then you'll learn the value of why aren't I winning? It's you have no leverage and no correlation in your lineups. It's you learn the value of projection because you're min cashing a lot, but you're not really getting up there because you're sharing too many points with your opponents. So thinking of concepts in those terms. So in MMA for the unique aspect. And then I was experimenting, proving a concept, exaggerating it to the extent of, let's say, there's on slates where no underdog wins. What's the value of a unique lineup? And I saw that the value of a unique lineup is very low, because it's very hard to have a unique lineup, because most of the lineups that spend most of their salary, those are the best lineups. Of course, they're duplicated too much. But the lineups that are unique, the separation between them, it's you're much better off. If I told you on this next week's MMA card that no underdog will win, right? That basically the highest scoring underdog is going to be in the optimal lineup.
What I would do is not play.
Right. Well, yes. You'd be better off not playing. But if I knew that and no one else did, you'd be better off playing lineups that are duped 10, 15, or 20 times, right? Maybe not 90, right? Maybe not like that, but you'd actually show, if you constrain yourself to the lineups that had the highest win probability for their lowest duplication, you'd actually come out ahead. You'd actually be profitable. You just have to weed out the really duplicated lineups, and you also have to weed out all the under fives. All, like, you can't have any because they have no shot. Because once you have 2 underdogs in your lineup, you're dead, right? So you can't have more than 1 underdog in your lineup. How many combinations are there? Find the lowest. I did that, and I'm like, that's the exaggerated version of that. And then you have the other side of the spectrum of what happens if you jam in 6 underdogs, right? And all you played were underdogs. You just removed all the favorites from the slate. Now, your unique percentage starts going up, but your win probability, yes, you'll have 150 unique lineups, but the likelihood of you actually winning solo is actually extremely low.
Yeah.
Right? It's very, very, very rare, just based on the odds. And just even if you look at the past data, if you want to go by actual results, but that's a small sample size, that the 6th optimal fight, like to get the nut lineup, is going to be 6 underdogs. But a lot of people make those, but if you go through, you'll see people that make 6 underdog lineups. They may start with the 8K fighter, right? The 8K fighter, the 7. They may not go the lowest underdog, but they'll play the 6 highest priced underdogs in one lineup, and that lineup may be unique. But its likelihood of winning is actually way, way lower than that. So on the extreme example, there's a value for that. If there's an extreme example on one side, if there's a value in being unique, there has to be on the extreme side a value of having the highest win probability, right? Of just the fighters winning and putting up enough points, even if you're duplicated. So there's somewhere in the middle where that balance exists to give you a portfolio of lineups that mesh them together. But the only way for me to prove that to some extent is by going to the extremes.
Yeah.
Right? Like on the DFS pregame show, a lot of times when people, especially newer players, and this is what we teach in the Theory of DFS course, is like the value of ownership. Because a lot of newer players may go, who's going to do well today? What do I care about how owned someone is? Or like, who cares as long as I'm picking the right players? And I said, okay, let's say you're playing a 10-person contest that is winner take all for first place. It's a $1 contest, $10 winner take all, and all 9 of your opponents are playing the same lineup. So they're playing. So every player and you're playing a lineup that is the same exact lineup and 1 pivot. So basically, you're playing a lineup with 7 100% owned players and 1 10% owned player. And all of your opponents are playing all 100 and 1 90% owned player. So it's like, okay, so what are the probabilities? What are the win conditions? Okay? So if your 10% owned player scores anything more than the 90% owned player, you win $10. You 10x. If they don't, you get nothing. If someone else played the 10% owned player and you played the 90% owned player, you know how much you win? 11 cents. Because you'll split first place 9 times, right? And $1.11 or something like that. So it said, so what is the value of you playing the 10% owned player versus the 90% owned player? Well, this is an extreme example of how sharing points is bad, right?
Yep.
And then what you would do, the second part of that exaggerated example is going, okay, well, now we have it exaggerated down to just 1 player. So one is 90% owned, one is 10% owned. So if we ran this 10 times and the 90% owned player beat the 10% owned player 9 times and you beat it 1 time, the value you playing the 10% owned player breaks even, right? Because it's 9-1, right? I mean, it's just as simple as that. So it's like, so based on your projected range of outcomes for the 2 players, does 1 player beat out the other player more than 9 times to 1, right? So one player, this player projects for, it's basketball or something. This player projects for 38 and this one projects for 32. How do I sacrifice 6 points for that lower ownership. It's like because it's 90 to 10 and obviously in this exaggerated example, we know all the other information and that's the only thing that's different. It's like, well, based on their range of outcomes, even 6 points in median, one player should not be 9 times more owned than the other player. Yeah, the other player may beat out your player twice, 3 times as often, maybe even. But if that's the case, you still profit by continually playing that player. So if that matters in that extreme example, you can't say that it doesn't matter in some nuanced example of, well, this lineup is like this, like that. The hard part is taking that extreme, that exaggeration, and then adding so many other variables to it and go, like, how much is the value of this worth versus the value of that versus the value of this? But for people that, like, just bypass ownership as even a thought, as far as what the expected value of a lineup is. Now, obviously, if you're building lineups and you're not like, I'm not basing my decisions based on ownership, but your lineup's expected value, they know that that's a factor, right? When Travis Petty says, like, I don't look at ownership for basketball, he knows that ownership matters a lot in basketball. He just knows that his process is so much different than the field that he's going to be naturally contrarian. Like he knows his lineups are going to be low enough owned without having to look and make sure that it's lower enough owned.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it's not like he's saying ownership doesn't matter. It's just that he gets the effect of that regardless. But to disavow the effect of ownership, like that's just stupid. I mean, that's right.
You're missing the point of DFS.
Right.
Yeah.
But in order to explain concepts and prove concepts and prove theories, I think using a simple, exaggerated version of any little problem that you have to prove it is a good starting point because, like Brian says, once you get to the two extremes and you really understand what the effects of this, then you can start adding and go, well, what happens if 2 guys were 50% owned in that 10-man field? What happens if this and what happens? And then you start seeing the effects of duplication and the effects of ownership. And you go, oh, now conceptually I understand that when a basketball player has a 38 point projection at 18% ownership, and another player has a little bit cheaper, has a 35-point projection at 8% ownership, you go like, well, they are a little cheaper, but they are a little lower projected, but the ownership doesn't seem, it seems like that 8% owned guy really should be 11 or 12% in comparison to the 17% owned guy. And then you start seeing it's like, maybe this guy is under-owned. Maybe this guy is over-owned. And you may not be exact on these numbers because you're not running simulations or anything. But once you understand the extremes, then it's like, I think you could be much more directionally accurate in your approach of just being able to look at a slate and go, yeah, this seems a little too, I look at these projections and this seems a little too high owned here. This looks a little low owned there. Like, it's much easier to see. You may not know the 1% to 2% differences, but you start seeing that, like, why on a 10-game slate is this, is Damian Lillard, Steph, you have 5 guards and 2 are like 22% owned and 1 is like 6% owned because of a perceived bad matchup. Right. And you go, yeah, he's 4 points lower projected, but like, why couldn't he score 70 today? I mean, like, you look at that and you go, that gap between the two players really doesn't warrant that ownership difference.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that these using extreme teaching mechanisms is really helpful. I think that's something that Brian Hooper actually does on his DFS videos as well, which I talked about a little bit when he was on my stream, that he does a good job also of using those examples as teaching mechanisms, just using kind of extreme examples, the same kind of approach that you use, which I think are definitely really helpful in teaching. Before we move on, I really want to talk about golf a little bit with you.
Oh, okay.
Did you play any PGA this week?
No.
All right. So
I see your line. I actually brought up the results DB for your. Did you just play 150 into the drive the green?
I played 150 in that, and then there was also a $5 contest that I also played 150.
Okay, so you didn't even put that much money. I mean, that's what, $750. What drive the green was a $5 contest, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it's not like you didn't play the 44-44, right? The
No,
$4,000
yeah.
contest. No.
I didn't do anything like that. I'm just curious if you have a take on the wave stacking. If you've been paying attention to what happened with, there were some people took very hard stances. I know, like Big T, for example, played 150 lineups that were all the AM PM wave, so he took advantage of the waves there. So there was supposed to be kind of extreme weather that would affect the PM AM group more than the AM PM group. So some people took a hard stance of playing only the AM PM golfers and completely eliminating the PM AM golfers from their player pool, which I didn't do at all. So I played it fairly straight. And just because I knew, it's obviously it's going to be in golfers' projections. It's going to factor in the weather in their projections. So I largely played it straight. It turned out that the weather did have a pretty big effect in terms of 6 of 6 rate. So I think apparently the AM PM golfers played with like a two-stroke advantage according to Skyhook DFS. So they ended up doing much better overall, the AM PM golfers, and the 6 of 6 cut rates for the AM people who stack the AM PM were much higher. So if you played all 6 of your golfers from the AM PM groups, you had a much higher 6 of 6 rate than those of us who played it straight. And I just from a game theory perspective, I've been going back and forth on whether it was the right move, even though those lineups ended up falling off because I think Justin Thomas was actually from the reverse wave. He was from the PM AM group. So the guy who won was from that group. And I think there were a couple others who did well ultimately from that group. So I don't know. Initially, I thought, well, I don't really care about, the goal isn't to go 6 of 6. The goal is to win the tournament. So, if you just getting 6 of 6 isn't something really to victory lap, in my opinion. But then also looking at, I saw Skyhook DFS posted numbers that it was only like 8 or 9% of people in the Big Millie had full stacks of the AM PM wave. So I don't know. I've gone.
I don't know what's the optimal rate of that. I mean, the problem with asking me is that I don't know what that correlation is. I mean, I don't know. I don't that's not something that I don't know what is the efficient frequency of those types of lineups. I don't know. But to me, 8% of the field doing that doesn't seem like a lot.
Yeah, it seems so. I mean, just think of it in this. There's you're either playing 6, 5, 4, 3, 1 or 0 from the AM PM stack, right? So it would be whatever. Let me see if I can find what the. So it seems like it's under-owned, actually, just based on my simple math there. I mean, wouldn't you expect 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? So whatever, 100 divided by 7.
How many golfers were there in the field?
Oh, that's a good point too. Yeah,
right?
I'm assuming a even split.
Yeah, but how many golfers total? I don't know. Remember, I didn't play. I don't know. 154? Yeah. I mean, how many were in the field?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, you'll need that number. I mean, obviously.
And my simple math is not correct.
But I'm saying 92% of the lineups didn't do that. So, like, to me, that number at least, to me, this is, I don't know what the correct, I don't know, doesn't lead me to be like, remember, like, I'm more likely to do what the field isn't doing, right? In high variance situations. But to me, 8% of the field doing something is not like, oh, if I hear everyone's doing weather wave stacking, like, I feel like I'm not going to do it. But when they say everyone, like, if 70% of people, like, that would be worthwhile. But when 92% of people aren't caring about the weather anyway, to me, how much is the correlation worth? I don't know. Like that, like what I would have done is, I don't know, because I don't know what the correlation. It's very similar what you say about 6 out of 6s in MMA. Like, I looked at, like, for instance, the Pereira-Ponzinibbio fight. The Pereira-Ponzinibbio and the Martinez-Vince Morales fights, I was low on. Both sides of the fight. Because those are the fights that projected to go the distance. And neither of them were going to be wrestling. And I'm like, can I find a winner here? Absolutely. Can I find 100 plus points here? not as often of the time. So a lot of
Right.
people were playing Michel Pereira, like he was like 33% owned, and I'm sitting there going like, I guess a win at 8,200 is worth something, but a likely win outcome for him that without a KO is like 60, 70 points, 75 points. So it's like, oh, well, I got Michelle Pereira and Jung Young Park at 78, and it's like, yeah, but you're not going to win first in large field. Like, yeah, you may prioritize that type of score for a small in the 555. You could get away. 555. I'm much more likely to prioritize win probability than in the large field contest. Like I'm much more likely to I'll play a lineup with like one big underdog maybe, and then the rest is like I don't need a million points. Like I don't mind playing the $9,100 guy that may not have the best upside, but if he gives me 90 and I get the 8% underdog that crushes, it's like I could win the 555. I mean, with 5, as long as I get 5 more, that low price underdog that wins, give me 5 winners. And that 6 out of 6 winner lineup, I could win 20K in the 555 with that. Right? But in the large field stuff, like why the fuck am I why do I care about getting 6 winners? Like, yeah, 6 winners will cash. Like, it's very rare that 6 winners does not get you at least 1.5x on a lineup, right? A lot of times 5 winners does, right? A lot of times 5 winners cashes you in anything, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes if the chalk fails, some of the chalk fails, and four high scoring winners and 2 losers, you could people have. I mean a couple of months ago, I came in second in the 555 with a lineup that had 2 losers in it. Right? So it's like, it's possible for that, but the large field, you ain't doing that, right? I mean, like, so to me, this type of question about like I've seen people on Twitter say your goal in PGA DFS is to just get 6 golfers through the cut and then worry about it later. But I think for large field, that's not
I think that might be the case on weeks where, 4% of lineups make 6 out of 6. So I think that it's more the case when very few lineups actually get 6 of 6 through, then, you're probably good enough just getting through the 6 of 6 cut. Whereas this week it was like 25% of lineups were 6 of 6.
So who cares? Well, people are victory lapping 6 out of 6s when it's 25% 6 out of 6. That's what was happening.
There was a lot of talk after the cut about percentages of 6 of 6, and to me, it mattered less this week because
so many people had it, a quarter of the field.
And then my assumption was that a lot of people were going to have very similar 6 of 6s because the weather split did actually work out so well in the favor of people who played those lineups that they would have a lot of similar lineups. It turned out that I guess there were fewer people than I thought who actually were playing the complete weather wave just based on Skyhook's numbers. So then I kind of went back and was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that actually was, a plus EV approach to just get those, to focus on the splits and worry about it later. But I don't know. I go back and forth because ultimately those lineups did not win because you just kind of needed one golfer from the other split to break in. So I don't know. It was a good approach to get 6 of 6 through for sure. I'm not sure that it was plus EV for actually winning the tournament, and it obviously didn't work out this time, but could have.
Yeah, 156 players were in the field. So I'm looking at the 2022 PGA Championship week, 79 after cut. If 25, I mean, I'm assuming a lot of the chalk. I mean, I'm looking at results DB. I mean, other than Cantlay, Scheffler, Norin, I'm assuming those are, and Matt and Hideki. I'm assuming those are the people that people were tilting over.
Yeah, oh yeah, major tilt, a lot of those.
But it looks like Rory, Cameron Smith did fine. Will Zalatoris.
Yep.
Justin Thomas was 17% owned, who won. Right, Cameron Young. 13% owned with 86.5. I mean, just seems like if you played a chalky lineup but still avoided Cantlay, Hideki, Scheffler, and Noren, like you had a high own. That's why the 6 out of 6 percentage was so high.
Yeah.
So to me, that's not Mito Pereira. Obviously, he blew it at the end.
Yep.
Yeah, typically you'll see more. You'll see when the 6 out of 6 percentage is like 5% or below. I'll see a lot of red here in results DB of players, the highest owned players, and then just in the top 1% of lineups, red.
Yep. So, I was just curious if you had given it much thought, just because there had been a lot of discussion of 6 of 6 versus win equity on Twitter.
If anything. If this was a smaller field, now obviously it's 156 golfers, so it's a little bit different. My first thought would be on combinations, because imagine I'm going to the extremes. Remember, extreme teaching mechanisms, right? Go to the extreme. Let's say this was a one of these invitational no-cut events with 20 golfers, right? Let's just go all the way down to 20.
Good.
And 10 were going off in the AM, one wave, and 10 were in the other wave. And you have to roster 6 golfers. How many combinations of 10 golfers? Because you're automatically saying, I don't want any of these 10. So anyone that makes just wave 1 or wave 2 has to pick 6 golfers at certain salaries out of 10. How many combinations is that? If you tell me 8% of the field of 142,000 entries, like, dude, I could tell you that those lineups are going to be duplicated a hell of a lot. I mean, just going to be way too duplicated because people are actively doing it and saying 8% of the field is going to be only playing 6 out of a certain 10, the exact 10. And maybe some of those combinations can't exist salary-wise even.
Yeah.
Right? Now, obviously, once you extend it to, there being 75, 78 or whatever, that is a little bit different. But maybe if you go by the 8% of that and you go like this and you go, what are the most popular combinations? Now that you could get rid of one side of one wave and go, well, if people are playing AM, PM, what are the 6 highest owned golfers in this wave? Can you fit them together or whatever? And what are the combinations? And maybe you don't play that because I look at these dupes. I mean, it's 156 golfers. The one lineup was duped 163 times by 14 users. So I'm assuming someone had like a train or something in.
Yeah.
But I mean, I see some lineups 35, 34, and this is ones where there's not a train. There's one that's duped 50 times by one user. So that's just CSV problem, or just like I'm just taking my cash lineup and just jamming it in 50 times. I'm talking about ones that aren't that. So you had 35, 34, 30, 29, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22. I mean, like, dude, how do you get those lines? Like, I don't even think of dupes in that. And then we also go to the 44, the Mega Millionaire, 630 entries. There was a dupe of 5, a dupe of 5, a dupe of 4, a dupe of 2. Like, dude, how do you have that? Dupes. How do you have that many dupes in a 630 person field? Like, dude, that's so, like, in a 630 person field to have a lineup duped at all is absurdly negative EV. I mean, just once, let alone 4 or 5 times. That obviously these are like cash. I'm looking at them and like I could tell based on the average ownership that these are like lineups that you'd play in double ups.
Yeah.
Right? So like, but that would have been my first thought when you said the AM/PM. Like my first thought comes into, well, now you're automatically telling me that a certain percentage of the field is going to be playing this wave or whatever like that. Well, which may also reduce combinations of a mix of the two. Maybe 3-3 lineups. Maybe you purposely, if you knew, now that's why I said 8% doesn't seem like a lot to me. But if you tell me, let's say extreme, we'll go to the extreme teaching mechanisms. You tell me 95% of the field is playing one wave or the other wave, I'll be playing like none of it. Like I would be playing I would play lineups actually that are 3-3, more likely than 5-1, because the combination of those 5 will be in more lineups because people are playing 5 out of 6, 5 out of 6. But to find 3 out of 3 combination, like now I have way more combination. Now I can play the 3 chalkiest guys from one wave and the 3 chalkiest guys from the other wave, and that lineup would actually be under-owned because 95% of the field is playing 6 from one and 6 from the other.
Right.
So that's how, what I would have done, or what the correlations matter, I don't know. But that's how I would think about the problem, at least. And whether or not you need that in a 156 golfer field, I don't know. I'm assuming a lot of they have invitations, and there's probably 40 golfers on the bottom that don't play them, right? It's just like the Masters type of thing where you're not playing Fred Couples, right? You're not playing Vijay Singh. These guys are not winning the Masters, right? So you can eliminate some of the guys, but still, there's enough golfers that I'm not sure you need to do that type of thing, but I think that's how I would think about the problem, at least.
Yeah. No, it's me too. I mean, we kind of came to the same conclusion that I was like, well, if other people are going to be forcing in these full stacks, I'm not going to do that just because it's probably going to be over-owned. But then I looked and saw the 8%, and I was like, okay, it didn't actually end up as over-owned as I thought it was going to be. So maybe, I
do you know the percent in the Mega Millionaire?
It was higher. I know that. I could look up Skyhook's tweet.
Right,
but it was
630
I want to say it was like
entries.
25% or something in the Mega.
Oh, okay, yeah. There I would have definitely. Yeah, if you would have told me that 25% of entries in the Mega Millionaire were waves.
Looks like it was actually 30%, 29.52%.
Yeah, I would have easily done I actually would have probably made groups. And I said, here's 70 golfers in one group, and no more than 4. Right? I don't mind a 4-2 lineup, but not a 5-1, because then I'm sharing, right? And most probably, if you're playing the Mega Millionaire 630, you're not playing 1% owned golfers, or you're probably eliminating most of, you're playing maybe a group of 30 golfers, something like that. And I'd separate it and be like, I'd rather not be 1v1s off of people that are doing waves. I'd rather be a 2v2 or a 3v3.
Yep.
And just, if you tell me 30% of people are doing that, that's why probably you're getting this duplication.
Yeah. I'm
assuming some of these dupes those were the 6 of the best 9 golfers from one of the, it's probably the wave that included Rory.
Yeah, I believe so.
Right, because I'm seeing the line. The most dupe lineup was Rory, Spieth, Xander, Cameron Young, Munoz, and Mito Pereira. I'm assuming because I see most of these lineups are Rory lineups. So whatever wave Rory was in,
I think Rory was in the good wave, the AM PM, where it was slightly better weather. Yeah, so I brought this question to you, having not really done much research into it myself, just kind of had been thinking about it a little bit just based on the conversation on Twitter. But I don't even know if it's an even split between AM and PM. If it is like a 50% in the AM versus 50% in the PM is kind of where people draw that line. I don't even know the answer to that question.
Were people doing wave splits like that, or was there a definitive, like one wave was projected to be much better and people did both just in case the weather changed?
No, it was projected to be much better. I think that the PM AM was supposed to be the worst weather. So it was supposed to be like wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour in the afternoon on Thursday, and then I think continuing into Friday morning and then kind of dying down. So it was sort of extreme weather conditions for the PM AM golfers, which led some people to being like, well, I'm just going to not play those golfers at all. I'm just going to play the golfers from the the non-weather groups.
But a lot of times, I mean, like I said, I have not played PGA DFS in a long time. Doesn't a lot of times, if the weather gets bad enough, they don't even play?
Yeah, they delay it.
Aren't there enough times where, like, the good wave goes off and they're decent, and then the bad wave, they just suspend play till tomorrow, and then end up getting better weather? Like, actually get better weather than the original wave.
Yeah. I don't play a ton. I'm pretty new to PGA DFS too, but I have seen that at least one week that I've been playing, and I would imagine it's fairly common. And I saw some harping on that, saying, they should have delayed this. Why are they not delaying this right now with the wind on Thursday? So
Or
yeah,
sometimes the weather
apparently,
changes. Sometimes the wave that everyone thinks is good, well,
right.
the weather comes in early, or the weather is late. Right? It's like,
Yeah,
oh, it's gonna be awful. It's like it's not gonna be raining much, but there's gonna be 18-mile-an-hour winds and some 25-mile-an-hour gusts at 6 in the morning, and then so don't play the morning guys. And then you find out that it's like, oh, it's 6 in the morning and it's only like 7-mile-an-hour winds because that storm, that line got a little bit slower and moved a little bit this way, and then next thing you know, it's noon and there's 18-mile-an-hour wind, and the wave that you're like, I wanted to avoid the morning, now the afternoon is the one that's the bad wave.
hard to predict weather. Yeah, that's another reason not to believe into, not to play full from one wave, because you never really know what's going to happen.
And sometimes you'd be right. Maybe the macro strategy, maybe it's the type of thing you'd have to back test it. I have no idea. Maybe the macro strategy is to always play waves. Maybe over the course of 48 weeks of golf, right? Yeah. In 48 weeks of golf, there's going to be 2 or 3 tournaments where the differential in strokes between the waves is dramatic enough that the winners and everyone that is the top of the leaderboard ends up coming from one side. That you don't know when it's going to be, and even though the weather forecast could be fine, you have no idea how things could. You basically take out that whole thing of you're just going to do the same thing every slate, and it's plus EV over time. And also, just because there's no weather, by chance 6 guys from one side could win. I mean, it's not like oh my God, if there's no weather, I have no chance. It's like if everyone has good weather, who says that just by chance one side has the top 6 or whatever?
I wonder if it would be more plus EV of a macro strategy to always play the lower owned wave, to just like jam in the lower owned every time, regardless of weather, and just hope for the best. Might be the more plus EV macro strategy.
Or you do, but no. What I'm saying is that you do both.
Okay.
Like you play 150 lineups, and you specifically play 75 from one wave and 75 from the other. Like you just, basically, if a golfer's going out in the afternoon, he's never going to be in a lineup with a morning golfer. Right? It's only afternoon golfers, only morning golfers. You do 75 of each, and you just do that literally every slate. Even on the slate where it's like, no, this wave is going to be dust. It's like, nope, I'm just doing 75 one side, 70. You never know, right? And, there's going to be no wind and no weather. There's nothing going. Well, I'm still doing 75 one side, 75 the. Like if you just did that all the time, would that prove to be plus EV? I don't know.
I don't know either. Might be really long-term plus EV. Might take a while to realize.
Well, it would be something that if you were doing golf, I would grab all the DK data and see and just run it, and even simulate if you want to simulate. But I would just look at the past. It's similar to what I did with MMA. Just give me all of the past, everything the DK MMA has ever had, and let me compare that to all the historical betting lines, and let me see where it comes out. And once I start looking at all of that stuff very simply and plotted, and I go, okay, these are the most correlative. This is what I should be looking at. And then just like, I have my sheet. I'm doing this. It's the same way every slate, tweak it here or whatever. So it's like, I don't have to worry about like, well, what do you think of that guy? It's like, I don't care. I don't care. But this guy, he got food poisoning 2 days ago. It doesn't matter. Did the line move? No. So I guess no one else cares about it either. So what do I care? Right? I think maybe you could do that in golf. But that's how I would analyze that. Like, how correlated are waves to each, but it's the very same thing as before, independent of weather. So, like, just go back and go, like, fantasy scoring correlation between golfers in the same afternoon or morning, and how often are they paired in the top 0.1% of lineups. And you have enough slates. You probably have 350 slates. I mean, PGA Golf on on DraftKings has been around for what, 7-8 years at least, right? So you have, 300 to 400 slates. That's enough for me. That's enough for me to look and go, what are the chances that no matter what, you don't know what the weather was, and just do that. Just how many 6 zeros? How many 5 1s? How many 4 2s? And just go, is this something that if I did this the entire time, would I get enough lineups in the top 0.1% of a contest like Drive to the Green?
Right.
And then you could also do it for the smaller field stuff and go, because you don't have to be perfect then, right? So maybe the top 1% lineups in a 500 person contest, like 3 threes come out often enough that you should play 3 of each or 6-0 or something. I don't know. To me, this is not an exact, like, you would obviously need context, but from the extreme methodology, you're just trying to find if you would do this one thing all the time, like, will it be plus EV? If you're playing rock, paper, scissors, and you know someone is throwing, paper, like 90% of the time, you just throw scissors 100% of the time. It's like, well, how about the 10% of the time that you don't know? It's like, just doesn't matter. Just keep on throwing scissors. He's gonna throw paper enough. Don't worry about the rock, right? That's really all you're looking at when it comes to this.
Yep, good example.
Okay, so Neil, everyone has been saying I'm going away for 8 days, and I'll be back. So no DFS in Nevada, nor would I want to play while I'm out there. Everyone has been saying on Twitter to you or in a podcast that a bink is coming. Apparently, you're due.
Yeah. I sure hope so. Appreciate the encouragement. It's been a long time coming. I feel like we started this podcast and I had like 200K binks in our first 3 episodes or something like that. It was like coming off 100K binks when we talked, and then it's been nothing since then. It's just been brutal since then.
Yeah, but that's very similar to Eric. When doing the podcast with Eric, we started the podcast, and that like 2-3 weeks in, I came off of a 50K bink, and Eric was playing the $1,500 single entry and losing every week, right? Yeah. And then losing, and then finally like week 16, he got like $130,000. Like
right.
Like he beat me by far. It's like the common theme is that like, oh, I made a little bit of money. Oh, I binked, and Eric's like, nope, missed, nope, missed, nope, missed. And then by the end of the season, he made way more than me, right? Because
Eric also plays much smaller volume than I do, much lower volume than I do, so he can afford to go a little bit longer without a bink.
No, probably. Well, maybe not.
Actually, yeah, because he doesn't play every day. He plays, on NFL Sundays, he plays probably about the same as much as me, but he doesn't play day to day. I don't think. Does he play MLB day to day? I'm forgetting.
No. He'll play NBA. He plays NBA day to day.
Okay, so maybe he actually
plays the same, but he plays the high state. He'll play 3 lineups in the 777 or something.
Yeah, so we might end up actually spending close to the same amount in terms of a dollar amount.
Right, and in NFL he'll probably put in maybe 3,000 or something, 4,000. I mean, he's playing like 3 lineups or something.
Yeah.
And you're playing 7 million lineups for
right.
$8 to $20 a piece.
Yeah. Yep. Very different.
I'd offered you encouragement, but who knows what's going to happen? Right.
More realistic.
Well, because there's no such thing as due. There's no such thing as hot. Right. There's no like prior, like, oh, well, based on a large sample size, based on your play being plus EV, you should expect to win X amount of the time.
Right.
That's over like 17 lifetimes. So like you could win 3 times in 1 month. You could not win for 3 years.
Right.
And that would be somewhere within some type of one standard deviation or whatever. So for me to say, oh, you haven't won in 5 months, it's coming soon. It's like, well, there's no
way to know.
There's no way to know. The DFS gods don't like your lineups, and the contests don't know that you haven't won in 5 months.
Right.
So it has to even out today, right? It doesn't know. The players don't know.
Yeah.
Who you're rostering today? Maybe we should go tell them. What starting pitcher do we have to tweet at to say Neil has not won in a couple of months. You have to do really well at 2%.
Please throw strikeouts. Yeah.
Right. Can you just please try to throw a couple of more strikeouts? Because I'm going to get you at 2% owned.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll work?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so try it out. It's no harm not to.
Exactly. Maybe I will.
At PlayerQDFS on Twitter. High Stakes DFS podcast comes out every Friday on YouTube, on iTunes, on wherever you get your podcasts. You're gonna start. I know you're gonna start running out of guests.
At some point, I'm gonna start. I've got guests lined up for the next 2, maybe 3 weeks, at least tentatively. So I'm doing okay for now. But yeah, at some point, there's not that many, high volume, high stakes players out there. Not many DFS pros, and then there's fewer, as you know, who actually want to come on podcasts.
Right.
So at some point, yeah.
All everyone should know is that when I'm a guest on that podcast, that means you ran out of guests.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of like I don't got anyone, so
I've already almost no. I really want to have you on as a guest, and people have requested flipping the script and having you on as my guest. So I think it would be fun, and I've thought about calling you and seeing if you were available one of these past few weeks. But
I typically am. I mean, that's why
because I want to save you. Part of the reason is because I'm like,
save me for a time where you could just like I got nothing and. Are you good tomorrow? Like that's typically I'm that type of person, right?
That's the reason I've waited
right.
on you. Yeah.
Just like David, I was on the Take Cast, and David just blatantly said, "Yeah, the guest that was supposed to be on this week canceled," and like it's basically like me, Brian Hooper, Pete, and whatever, like and Pat Mayo, who are like I know that if I could, the day before, you're most likely available at the middle of the afternoon for an hour, so like. So whatever, that's what it is. I mean, dude, I was the same way when Eric, right? When Eric can't make it this week. Who could? And then who am I going to? Like, is Josh Engelman available? I mean, I'm thinking of people that this is what they do for a living to some extent. Content like who's available in the middle of the afternoon on a random Tuesday or something.
And comfortable, they've got the setup. They're comfortable speaking in front of a camera. Yeah.
Right, I've seen and someone that that has. It's like I know they have a microphone and right. A lot of times it's sometimes the tech thing where you see like why are the same people the guests on different shows? It's like because we know that we're not dealing with people that have bad connections and they're on their phone and the audio quality is bad, so we kind of know what's going on. But if you have any recommendations for guests for this show, you could always tweet me at BlenderHD or email Jordan@theoryofdfs.com. I'm going to try to mix in some people in between weeks and whatever. And then once we get to football season, we'll be every week because at least there'll be something to go over with. Or maybe people are tired of our MMA duplication talks every 2 weeks.
It might be. It's a complicated topic, but I think that's kind of the audience that has maybe come in for this. I think there are enough people interested in MMA, and it seems like there are enough people that are really into the MMA duplication talks. That's worth talking about.
Well, I want this. I want the contest to get bigger. The problem is I want them to be more duped. So I'm kind of doing a disservice. I'm like getting people. Yes, you should play this, and then and I should be saying you should play this, and then play the most duplicated lineups.
Right.
Okay. Well, if you want to learn more about these concepts, the extreme teaching mechanisms, you can get the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.